My name is Era, and I'm the host of the Tamil Creator Podcast. I chat with creators from all over the world to share their stories and discuss hot topics in a way that I hope inspires, educates, and entertains you. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tamil Creator. And today we have a special guest. Her name is Sumi Shan, and she is a self-described connector. She's been in the political world. She'll talk about that a bit later. Ton of entrepreneurial kind of ventures, and she's provided communications, public affairs, and go-to-market strategies in both Canada and the U.S. And she's worked across a number of sectors, including corporate, government, and nonprofit sectors over the last 17 plus years. So just some of the key highlights. Obviously, the focus of today's discussion will be around Dunya Habitats. So her role as the Chief Strategy Officer. She's also founded companies, or I guess consulting firms, including Niche Strategies, Tex Ventures. She did public relations at Microsoft and many years working various roles within the government as well. And she founded Dunya Habits with her brother Sajeevan, as well as Dr. Shivajan Sivapalan. And I'll let her kind of talk a bit more about Dunya Habitats and kind of what they're working on. It's very fascinating, especially kind of if you're interested in the topic of food scarcity, urban farming, kind of just around those topics. So without further ado, I'll let Sumi introduce herself and tell us a bit about herself, her family, her upbringing, just to kick things off.
Hey, really appreciate you making the opportunity for me to come and speak to you today. I guess a little bit about my upbringing. I was born in Sri Lanka to Tamil parents. I am a Tamil, so hence I'm on the Tamil Creator Show. But we're from northern Sri Lanka, from a little Tivu called Pungradivu, and we immigrated to Canada in the 80s. My father was a refugee, and then we followed soon afterwards. So certainly a different environment in the 80s than has been for more recent refugees coming from Sri Lanka. So our experience was a lot different. There wasn't that many of us. It was a smaller community. There was only so many of us. So we clung on to each other very tightly in the earlier parts. So, I mean, that I think certainly provided sort of my experience and how I find myself navigating as to, my Tamilness and how I interact with my Canadian identity as well. But very social impact oriented and politically aware families. So you can imagine the dinner table conversations. So it's very a formative part of my my journey. Hence my stint in politics as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to kind of maybe go to that. I know that kind of before we get into the exciting stuff, not to say this is not exciting, but in terms of when you ran for the Ontario Liberal, candidate race in the Scarborough Rouge Park area, I think it's a very brave thing to kind of do something like that. I mean, just because I'm terrified of like crowds and talking to people, and obviously that's a big part of kind of that role, which is putting yourself out there, talking about topics in an eloquent way. I don't feel like I'm eloquent at all, so I already remove myself from that kind of experience. But can you describe that experience? What made you decide to do it? What you learned from that experience, and is politics something that you want to kind of go back into eventually?
Yes. So, I mean, the decision for me to run was not an easy one. I've been in politics for probably over the last 20 years. I started very young, having, started off attending my first political rally in the 90s for Don Chrétien. But later studying politics and then being in government, I've worked the back rooms. I've been an organizer. I've been on the riding associations. I've helped connect people and so forth. I didn't really think of running per se. I'd perhaps maybe when I was older, it's something that I would perhaps love to do as a possibility, but it wasn't certainly a part of my cards at this point. But I think for 2018, we were in a situation where we were looking at a potential Trump style sort of government coming in. And I think we are quite well aware of the current government and the situation we are in right now. And having been part of the first two McGuinty terms soon after Mike Harris, everything that we had to do to really turn back some of the very regressive policies and look to seeing how we can really support, Ontarians as a whole. It was certainly a part of my decision making as to, well, I did not want, somebody of that extreme ideology being in power. And I mean, it's a Tamil creator show. I think the elephant in the room is that I actually ran against a fellow Tamil, but I think, that showcases the diversity in our ideologies within the community itself. Certainly some folks would have been like, oh, you should not run against another Tamil, which I heard quite a bit at the door. But at the same time, my thought was in the government that I wanted and the services that I wanted to provide for the riding that I was in, which had a huge Tamil population, meant that, having a liberal government, which is the party that I ran under, would provide the services that we would require and, have an open ear to our concerns and so forth. And I did not see that, regardless of the other individual, that would be the case. I'm certain that the individual, the current member, is doing the best that he or she needs to do, but that was certainly part of my decision making in deciding to run. It was a last minute request because the incumbent was stepping down due to personal reasons. And so the party had reached out to me to see if I would be interested in running. And I had a lot of family and community members reach out to me as well. So it was not an easy decision. I certainly was not going to put my name on the sign. I think that is a huge decision, and it's not easy by all means. So for anybody who puts their name forward, kudos to you, because trust me, it's one thing working and knocking on behalf of someone else, but then knocking on behalf of yourself and trying to sell yourself is certainly not an easy endeavor.
Yeah, no, I think just the idea of politics is interesting to me because as I'm getting older, I'm kind of learning a bit more about what I can and kind of, why ideologies kind of are divided and, what part does the government have in terms of controlling, the everyday lives or like what people perceive. So, taxation is obviously a big one, immigration, etc. Um, and in my mind, I was like, I guess I think of business as kind of another way to do what you could do in politics, but in a less public way, and maybe get things done faster. Because with government, naturally, because of all the decision making, kind of how things are layered in the bureaucracy, things obviously happen slower. But I guess in my head, I'm trying to wrap around the idea of like, what do you see as kind of a balance between? Because I'm just thinking ahead of kind of the conversation we'll have around Dunya Habitats and the work you're doing there. I feel like that's something governments should have been already thinking about, like not just Canada, but kind of on a global scale. But it's companies like yourself that have to do that kind of thinking. So how do you reconcile kind of the role of government versus corporations or companies, I would say, driving changes like that are not just strictly like profit driven, but obviously there's a huge social impact?
So certainly, I think the issue at hand is that government cannot do everything, right? And government only knows so much. And I do believe that businesses and community organizations and activists also need to step up. Like, if without them, government certainly won't run, and certainly they're not going to know all of the issues. So I think it kind of goes part and parcel. There's a fine balance, certainly. I think government can enable businesses and communities to really to grow they're also, government is also there to help lift up the more vulnerable in our community that can't do it for themselves. But at the same time, I believe there are areas that businesses can support and can do well, good, and help influences policies, and that goes along with our social activists and such. So you don't have to be in politics, is what I'm saying, to be able to really affect change. And I think that is of the mind that I am, in that I've been able to kind of navigate both worlds. I certainly felt a huge responsibility when I was in government to ensure that when I am part of the policy decision making process, that I keep in mind the individuals that I'm making those policies for. And I think businesses do that all the time, because they're focusing on their target market and their needs, and they're building those products for those individuals. So we're both doing similar things. It's just that government is more socially driven, and looking to ensure that they are building a social network or fabric for us to ensure that no one goes under or slips through, and that we have the healthcare and all of that sort of system in place to really take care of our communities. But at the same time, we certainly, businesses can help push a lot of policies through. But I do believe that we have to be mindful, because a lot of businesses can be very one-track, self-interested. And I think there are a lot more businesses, especially that are popping up now, that are more social impact oriented, which is where Dunya is focused on.
Yeah, so when we get to like Danya as well, like in terms of how did this whole idea come, how did the founding team, like we'll start with kind of how, why you started this, what the big idea around Dunya Habitats is and what you're trying to solve. And because I realized I didn't do a good job explaining it, so I'll let you, since you co-founded it, explain what you guys do.
No, you did a fine job in explaining. But Dunya actually was started by my brother and co-founder Sujeevan Shan. He started it out as the story is that it kind of came together all at once. He was doing a pitch competition, looking at refugees and their situations, and it was through the Halt Prize. They had a partnership with the Clinton Foundation. And so his team was looking at, what can we do to help, bring dignity back to refugees. He himself was looking at sort of food scarcity issues with Indigenous communities in Canada. And it just happened that around the same time, our Appa, who's retired and goes back and forth from Sri Lanka, was in Jaffna, and he's an agricultural officer coming from a smallholder farming family. He really wanted to kind of give back to the local community and to support the farming ecosystem there. And what he had noticed on one of his many trips to the Jaffna food market was that there was a young man there was selling produce, but he wasn't there all the time. And so he reached out to him and said, young man, why aren't you like here every single time? That's, you've got to be more diligent. You've got to be like, his thinking was this young man wasn't being responsible, but in reality, the situation the young man was dealing with was that he had a very small plot of land. Jaffna area doesn't have the greatest arable lands. It's a very drought prone area. So he didn't have enough produce to sell all the time. And so my father, he started a little miniature greenhouse project to see, what he can sort of figure out. And he was dealing with droughts and pests. And so what Sujeevan decided to do is that, looking at one of the refugee camps in Syria and how they work. They built a small community garden, and they were really trying to bring in a local marketplace within the system that they can buy and sell produce and have something more healthy. And then at the same time, this sort of situation with Appa in Jaffna happened. So what he designed was a miniature greenhouse system that was optimized for any climate and any space. So it was using biomimicry of beehives. It's a hexagonal unit that can be scaled as you go. So, with one of our smallest footprint, it's about 100 square foot, but you can expand it to as your market needs grow. So you can start off small and then add multiple units as you go. And within 100 square foot, if you look at lettuce, you can grow 1,000 pounds of lettuce every 4 weeks. Right. So whether it's lettuce or kale or spinach, there's a variety of produce that you can grow, but certainly that was something that was looked at, and that hence Dunya came through. And his focus was certainly looking at how do we mitigate the global food security issue with over 800 million people starving, and then also climate change was affecting how we're farming. And coming from a smallholder farming family, what does that mean for smallholder farmers who can't compete with the big guys, who have all the bells and whistles of technology at their hands and can mitigate any climate change issues, right? So hence Dunya was born, and myself and Shiv joined Sujigan because we really believed in what he was doing. As you had mentioned, I had started Tech Ventures a couple of years ago, and our focus was on social innovation and social impact, and really looking at how we can have market-driven products support our societal problems within society, whether it's health, farming, agriculture. We didn't want to just build another a rideshare program. Not that they're not needed, but it's something a bit more substantial, and we all have to eat, so it made sense to us, and it was a great opportunity for me to kind of get back into our heritage of farming as well.
This episode is sponsored by nobody. That's right, nobody. So if you could be kind enough to hit that subscribe button, that would mean a lot to me. Yeah, I think you called the product, was it Tiny Farm?
Yes, the Tiny Farm system.
But I like I guess the software part of it. I think the AI-driven part of it, which I think you called Amma, right?
Yes.
Like as in Amma, as in like Tamil, like Amma, like your mom, is that?
Tamil as in Amma. It was an ode to our mother who has passed. But it was, Amma Bhumi looks over us all. It provides us in nutrients and everything. And we thought it was an apt name for a system that was overseeing the whole production of the unit. So within our unit, Amma, which is our sensor platform system, allows you to remote monitor it. Monitor the growth, so pH, water, liquidity levels. It allows us to help us collect real-time data so we can support, educational, really optimizing growth production and getting back to the farmers and letting them know, what's the optimal way of growing and how much water and nutrients are going into the system, and looking at compliance down the road as well, and a marketplace system that would allow a decentralized food system that, where one can grow for their own needs, but grow enough that they can also sell back into the market. And so if distributors and grocers knew exactly how much you were growing and when that harvest was going to be ready, it could kind of help cut down the food waste that happens at the front end of production. And our intent with a decentralized system is really locating farms closer to communities and cutting down the last mile in transportation.
It's really smart. So like if you're a farmer and, I guess number one is like, how do you find these farmers that are willing to use what you have? And then if I'm a farmer and I'm like, hey, this sounds great, this is solving a ton of my issues, how does a farmer, how do they get started? Like, what do you send them? How do they put it together? Do you help them put it together? Like, how do they access all this data you're giving them with Amma, like the Amma solution? Like, how does that, maybe walk me through that?
Yeah, so the end product is that they would reach out to us on our via our website or through one of our sales agents, and through our network, and let us know that they're interested in indoor farming, something that is of a smaller size. So we're a mid-size compared to our competitors, who are generally the shipping container guys. They're a little bit of a larger units, but we had heard that they can be a bit cumbersome to move around and use. And we're really looking at ensuring that it's the growing and the use of it is very intuitive. So they would reach out to us, let us know that they're looking to grow X, Y, and Z, whether it's lettuce or bok choy or spinach or something, and that the square foot that they're looking to do, whether it's 100 square foot or a 600 or a 900 square foot, really depends on their needs. But you can use hydroponically, you can probably grow 15 times more on an acre in one of our indoor farming than you could, using traditional growing, right? Of course, we're not looking to we're looking to complement the process versus taking it over, but reach out to us. We'll consult. We'll figure out what your needs are, and then get going on that. But I want to be mindful. We're early stage right now. We haven't officially launched. We're doing a soft launch soon, and we have some early sort of customers through our networks that have reached out from the NGO community, as well as farming and sort of like microgreens growers that we've been kind of having conversations with, and we're building products for, but it hasn't officially launched. It's not something that is totally new. We know that the issue is out there and that it's needed. Certainly, we spent a whole year doing various sort of market study conversations with a number of different verticals to find out if this is something that they would be interested in. And I think being that it is a smaller footprint that allows you to scale as you go was certainly something that folks were looking at. The fact that it is more cost effective than buying one of the larger units was another area, especially when you're looking at sub-Saharan Africa and subsistence farmers or NGOs that are like the UN that are working with communities there to kind of mitigate against climate change. We were looking at pricing and a whole bunch of other things. So certainly all of that was top of mind as we got started. But just to I guess answer your question, reach out to us through our website. We'll figure out what your needs are, and we'll build the product depending on the sort of the square footage. We provide sort of customer service. The Amma subscription is free for a year, so you can get used to it and get comfortable with it. You don't have to use it. You could be analog and just grow within the system. But we do believe that the ability to track the data and can really help optimize some of the growing parameters, and really it's the opportunity to connect into a marketplace system, right? So you grow, the marketplace system will showcase to whomever your customers are, your buyers, that your harvest is going to be ready at a certain time, and then they can make arrangements to buy from you.
Yeah, I've been always fascinated with kind of food scarcity since I read like an article 5 years ago around, I think it was Nunavut or Yellowknife, where indigenous communities that were kind of very far away from, like, we're used to this convenience and go to the grocery store and pretty much buying whatever we want at a reasonable price. But reading that, like, a head of lettuce is like $12, or like, tomatoes are like 3 times what they pay here, just because of the cost of transporting and getting food items up there. And I think they started exploring hydroponic farming and just interesting ways to kind of reduce that last mile problem of distribution, of like getting food to these remote areas. And even like, I think just looking around the world, where even I think there's a guy in LA, I don't know if you've read his story. I'm like super like amazed by what he did, where he kind of just dedicated his life to kind of making people like to connect with farming and urban farming in like LA, which I found super fascinating.
This is the sidewalk garden guy, right?
Yeah, I forgot what they called him,
Yeah,
but like the gangster
yeah,
gardener or
the
something like
gangster
that.
gardener.
Yeah, really memorable. So it's just kind of obviously, like you said, global warming, and just I think one of the things I think of during COVID is, you have these empty malls or like retail spaces, and like just kind of how real estate and the nature of how it's going to be used will change in cities. And one of the first things I thought of, and I'm seeing companies starting to do this, is changing malls to kind of what do they call them, warehouse farms, where like it's like pretty much like hydroponic farming in like an urban setting.
Yeah.
So like if I wanted like lettuce or like these things you're describing, I can get it fresh it reduces the environmental impact. So I'm just like very fascinated, and like I want to get involved in this space somehow. Like my romantic dream, and like another reason why I like the space is I feel like farming's impact has kind of been, farmers have been kind of reduced to almost like afterthoughts, and like, you know, they used to like, they're very super important to kind of the food supply in Canada, but like nobody really talks about them. And my, one of my dreams is to kind of have a farm in the future. I think it's going to be a ton of work. um, I watched this documentary called, you probably watched it too. Everything I'm saying you probably already seen. I think it's called, do you know what it's called? It's like this couple in San Francisco, they moved out to like, they found like this plot of land. They turned into like the most beautiful farm you've ever seen. Oh my goodness, I don't know what it's called.
I think I know what you're talking about, but
Okay.
you're actually seeing quite a number of individuals like yourself, and like, I mean, even ourselves. Like, yes, our father was a farmer, our grandfather was a farmer, and this actually gives us an opportunity to kind of touch base with our roots. But let's be honest, like I haven't spent the last 20 years farming, right? But it certainly was something that I'm interested in because I think, as you said,
Sorry, it's
you
called
know,
the biggest. It's called the biggest little farm. Sorry, I had to
yes,
like.
no
Okay.
worries.
Yes.
But I was just gonna say it's that, as you said, farmers have become an afterthought when, eating is like the first thought of anybody when you wake up. So, food is important, and I think it's we have to be mindful and respectful of the people that produce our food and the importance that they play in our society. And unfortunately, they've they've taken a backside, especially with the larger corporate farms and all of the big sort of guys doing it. A lot of our smallholder farmers are suffering. There's over 550 million, I think, smallholder farms globally, and that's a lot of families that can be impacted should climate change or a big farm decide to take over what they're doing. And some of them are you know I keep saying a lot, but what I mean is there's a lot of family history, right? It's their heritage that are being overtaken. And here's an opportunity, I think, with indoor farming, vertical farming, whether it's hydroponics or not, is an opportunity for our generation to be really involved. The farmer that we're working with right now in Kingston area, they actually only started 15 years ago. They left their whether it's corporate or whatnot jobs uh, aside, and decided to buy a farm amongst a couple of friends, and they're organic farmers now. But I see a lot of those kind of stories, whether they be in California or in Ontario or Alberta. A lot of people are kind of looking towards this because I think we have to be mindful. COVID has certainly brought us to top of mind, that whether it's border issues or even local issues, we only have so much food to go around should something happen. The world came to a standstill, and we were lucky in Ontario, but I know of other island nations that because they depend on produce being imported from United States, with borders and shipping and everything, supply chains being impacted, they could have ran out of food in 2 to 3 weeks. So there's a certainly an impetus to ensure that cities and communities have some are sustainable and are able to have certain sort of, I guess, farming or growing systems within their own vicinity, so they can meet the needs should they rise up.
Yeah, I think from every like negative, potentially negative situation like COVID, I think there's a potential good that's come out of it, which is, you know, we've had the system going for a long time where, like you said, countries are used to importing things and not really trying to be self-reliant as much. But now, when something really bad happens, where they're at a point, like you said, where they have 2, 3 weeks of food supplies and otherwise people are going to be starving, it really kind of puts that priority up on the government's list or whoever's looking at it to be like, how do we become more, sorry, more self sufficient? So also something you're talking about with like the smallholder farm kind of legacies is, you know, as we got more industrial with kind of farming, I think a lot of the best practices that made farming sustainable for many thousands of years kind of got lost with kind of genetically modified seeds, or like just, ruining land and making it not arable anymore, like turning it almost into desert. I think, like one of the things I was fascinated with, just kind of the process of in I think the biggest little farm, they talked about kind of rotating where animals kind of ate, just so to kind of let the ground kind of recover. It's just like these small little things that are not done anymore, just because they don't produce this much food. Like it's not as efficient, obviously, as industrial farming. So yeah, I think what you're doing is amazing. I think one of the things I think of is like agritech is just very hard to sell people on because it's not as sexy as other spaces, but it's super important. It's really hard to raise money. I think I'm seeing more and more money go into it because of the reasons you mentioned. But you know, you guys have been doing this for like 3 years, and it's a lot of hard work building something potentially like society changing as what you're building. So what's kind of made you stick out, or stick it through for the last 3 years doing this difficult thing?
Um, it's the fact that we believe in it. We believe in the product. We believe in what we're trying to do, which is one of the reasons. And I'll be frank with you, it hasn't the last 3 years has not been easy. It has certainly been an uphill for us. Much like anybody else in hardware, in the hardware space, but ag tech, as you said, it's not the sexy sort of tech sort of the tech that everybody is investing in. And luckily, things are starting to change. People are starting to look at social impact investing, as well as agricultural funds and such. But we were pretty nobodies when it comes to the agricultural sort of society here in Canada, right? So to us, it doesn't matter to them that we come from a smallholder farming family. We're not part of the same fabric here, of the sort of the mainstream community in what they consider sort of investable individuals here in Canada. So certainly it has not been easy. We self-funded it originally. I left a job at Microsoft. My brother used to be in mining and had a photography business. We invested our own funds into it. There was a time where we thought we weren't sure if we were going to be able to get through to the next stage. We built an alpha. We had secured some LOIs and all of that. It was great news. The first year was awesome. We went to some amazing conferences, and everybody was really interested in what we were doing. But then the next task was to really build out the commercial prototype, and that required a lot of funding and finding the right manufacturer, and it wasn't easy. Luckily, one of our three advisors came forward and provided a small pre-seed fund for us, that allowed us to kind of get through that hurdle. But close to COVID, when the COVID happened, we were debating whether we pivot or we close shop, because it was getting really tough, especially the investor conversations were really tough. And being someone who was a connector and kind of being in that space a little, both here in Canada and being exposed to it in California, I certainly thought I had a better chance, but reality says otherwise. But a year and a half later, we're still here. People are interested. We had a few early customers already. A commercial prototype is ready. We're working on our next stage of our platform development and looking at a soft launch. So that says, I think, a lot for me to be able to say we're keep going. But what kept us going was the fact that we actually did do and still do believe this is a needed product, and this is something that the folks in farming, whether it's urban or rural, require.
Did you know that every time you left a 5 out of 5 review for this podcast, a Tamil parent lets their child pursue a career in the creative arts? Okay, that's probably not true, but if there's a chance that it is, do you really want to jinx it? Leave a review. Do it for the young creative in you. has there been any thought to kind of selling this? Obviously, like you're focusing on areas that are like Sri Lanka, Syria, like areas where this should be something affordable, easy, portable, etc. But has there ever been thought to kind of doing this in like Canada, the US, in, because maybe there's a bit more money there, or like it might be easier to kind of do that there first? Like, I'm just curious on your thought process of like how you determine where you want to go first.
So the surprising thing is when we first started, we actually got a lot more international interest.
Mm.
Whether it was Europe, Africa, Middle East, India, and Sri Lanka, that was where the interest was coming from. And so we were gravitating towards them because we started having the conversation with the local market, and the local market just hadn't we're early adopters in some things, but we're not so early adopters in certain things. So when it comes to farming, folks weren't so keen on it. If they were going to do something of this of with respect to hydroponic farming, they were looking to do the big factory-sized models, or they were doing the greenhouse systems, but the greenhouse systems have their own issues as well. So it wasn't a top of mind, so we did consider it, but that was still part of sort of our area of focus. We just thought it might take a little longer. I think with COVID, we had to pivot our market entry strategy. So instead of our first market entry being like Africa or Europe, we decided let's see what our domestic market is going to be like. And I think with border closures, E. coli breakouts in California and New Mexico, a lot of people were starting to think about what can we do to increase production level here in Canada, right? What can we do to support off-season farming? Because I mean, we're very much a seasonal farming country. What can we do to start growing in our urban areas? Take advantage of some of the brownfields or the as you said, the empty malls, the parking lots, the rooftops. So what can we do? So here we are, we're a product that is versatile for a number of various sectors. We, of course, are validating with the farmer right now. We're focusing first and foremost on sort of food security organizations that are looking to support vulnerable communities. But at the same time, like food banks and Indigenous communities and stuff, because that is kind of where our heart is. But at the end of the day, it is a product that anybody can use. All right, so you can put it in your backyard. Our wall units can be sold separately. You can put it in your condos or your schools, libraries, or restaurants. If you want to grow certain herbs that you may not get to you from California, or the fact that you can grow them. They're 40% more aromatic oils, so they taste great fresh, versus waiting 6 weeks for something that has been in a freezer traveling across country.
If you ever do sell them to, I guess the individual market, or thinking, I guess individuals like myself, I will definitely order it. I will market this for you because I love this space. I think there's a lot of cool stuff happening, and I think it's obviously a good combination of something that's needed. And I think, I understand, in a business you have to make money, but I think you can do two things. You can make money while doing good.
Mhm.
So, um, a question I want to kind of around was, you co-founded. For me, I have a rule, which is I don't like to do business with family. It's just like it just gets messy. But you co-founded a company, and building a company with like people, friends, etc. Like I've done it, and it's super hard. There's a lot of potential points of frustration, etc. You built a company, or building a company with your brother. So tell us about that. Like, how do you guys manage that? How do you not like, have that crossover between a frustration at work, bleeding into your personal relationship? So yeah.
So it's not easy, that's for certain. I had started out at other companies with a cousin as well before. So it's, we come from a family not of only farming, but of small business and teachers as well. So it kind of, it's something that, I think we're a little bit more used to, because my grandfather had businesses that my uncles were part of, then my dad was part of. There were small businesses like shops and stuff in Sri Lanka, but it was still a family run sort of enterprise, right? But running businesses with families are not easy, and Sajeevan could tell you the same thing. We're very close, being the only two siblings in our family. But there have been times when we probably wanted to throttle each other's throats. But it's a matter of like working through that, because at the end of the day, we are family and we believe in what we're doing. So if we really want to make this a success, we need to get over and put aside our egos and our hurt feelings and all of that. Certainly we have a great buffer with our third partner, Shiv. I think he helps a lot, being the sounding board for the both of us. But at the end of the day, if you believe in what you're trying to do, you'll put aside all of your other issues. And I think, we had I'll be honest, we had a patch where we were like, oh, do I have to talk to you? But I think we've kind of grown through that and have come to terms with that. And I think it makes us, even stronger as both a family and as a company.
I think the love-hate line is very thin, and I think with anybody you've loved, there's probably points when you want to throttle each other. I don't think you really love each other unless there's points where you want to throttle each other. So I see.
Certainly, I think the sibling rivalry comes up occasionally.
Yeah.
You can sense it.
Another aspect I want to touch on was, you're a female in tech. I feel like, and you're Tamil, so like you keep adding like adjectives, and it's like a very small group of you guys. So how do you find that experience? Like, do you find it different than like your male counterparts that are founders or co-founders of companies? Like, do you notice anything in terms of how you're treated or how you're viewed, or yeah, just tell us about that if there is anything. So
I mean, I think certainly, I've been, I think every sort of career journey I've been is part of one where, I was one of a handful of women or a handful of persons of color, right? Of diverse individuals, and certainly tech has been for the large amount of time been a male dominated area, and for somebody who is not an official techie. I'm a non-techie in a tech world. They need us. All right. It certainly hasn't been the easiest. It's definitely, at one point they either put you on a pedestal because you're a woman founder, and that comes with a certain amount of issues in itself, or the other times they don't pay attention to you. So it certainly hasn't been the easiest, but you grin and get through it. Is how I've done most of my businesses. Certainly I've noticed, male founders being invested in more easily, whereas, as a woman, you kind of have to validate your experience and who you are and what you're doing. And I find that as a person of color, that's like times two. Right. Certainly it's not easy, but there's opportunities, doors don't always open for me. So I have to make my own doors occasionally. And I think we look for people that believe in us and are very committed to us. We've been fortunate as a team, to have advisors that have kind of stood by us. They provided in-kind services and advice and connections for us, which has been invaluable. And I think those are the ones that I try to find. It's those it's a needle in a haystack sometimes, because certainly it's not easy, but I have to search quite a bit before I'm able to get that. And I do wish it was a bit easier. But it is what I'm dealing with, and I can only complain about it so much, right?
yeah, and I think you describe yourself as like a connector, and I think I see myself the same way, where I see the value. Like, they have that saying of like your network is your net worth, but like basically it's valuable to have a big network. How did you go about building like a network? Because when I first started doing it, I guess I thought of networking in a kind of negative way as it being inauthentic, but I've realized kind of you can do networking your own way, whatever feels natural, and it just takes time to kind of do that. So, how did you personally go about building this extensive network of yours and becoming this, I guess, super connector in a way?
So I'm a bit of an introvert, but I'm also a bit of an extrovert. So I think it's a bit of a little bit of both. But I think growing up in Rexdale, in an immigrant family, in a Tamil family, where both your parents are working three jobs, we didn't come from privilege. My only way out of Rexdale, or to be able to get jobs that were, I guess, better. My words are being, I'm losing my words, but it just meant that, I didn't have the networks or connections to land me a job very easily, and I had to make that. And I think it came through, I was volunteering and co-oping at a hospital. It was a day surgery program, and one of the nurses took me under her wing, and she kind of instilled in me the need to network and learn. Is to meet as many people as possible, to network with people, because you never know who might be able to help you, right? And so it was sort of my opportunity to learn from others, because I can only learn so much from my family, and my parents. They were limited in what they were able to could do for me, especially in Canada. So it was a matter of making those connections, and I think it was probably purely selfish at that point, because it was like, what do I need to do to get into university? What are the sort of the volunteer situation that I needed to do? And so, I started thinking very young about it, right? So I was very diligent in how I went about, because I knew that if I didn't do X, Y, and Z, I might not get into a university. So I think that part has certainly has been a part of my journey, because it's in the back of my head. So whether it was in government, it's making friends, it's making those connections, because I needed those connections to be able to do my job and to learn from them, from previous, whether it's from senior staffers, to build those bridges. So I learned to be able to build bridges very quickly, and I found it easy. I guess I'm likable to a certain degree. Right. So I think certainly that was the ideal, and I'm always a curious person, and I'm hungry for knowledge, and that meant surrounding myself with new people and new experiences, and yeah, and it just naturally kind of happened, because some of the connections came through that.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of the things you kind of resonated. Like I would skew more towards being introverted, but I can be extroverted for like periods of hours, and then I need to
Yes.
recharge by myself. I think actually being introverted actually helps. It's like kind of like a weird, it's like counterintuitive, but I feel like being introverted actually makes you more likable or better networker, because like you often listen more than you talk.
Yeah.
You think you're like what's the word, reflective. And I
Hmm.
think one of the things like I do as well is I try to give more than I take, which is also counterintuitive, because
Yes.
it's like once you start doing that, like people, like when you start doing stuff for people or giving value and not expecting anything, it's like very unusual. So I guess
Hmm.
it's kind of standing out that way.
Yeah.
Money can be hard to come by, but here is $100 opportunity for you. Join my free newsletter for free exclusive content and a free chance to win $100 when I hold special draws. Did I mention that it's free? Um, I guess for yourself and I guess Dunya as well, like where do you guys see yourself? I know it sounds like an interview question, but in the next 3 to 5 years, where do you see yourselves?
So 3 to 5 years, I guess, for our investors, profitable and scaling globally.
Yes.
Personally, I want to, I guess by year five, know that I've helped millions of growers grow food and help generate livelihood options, right? And to provide healthy, fulfilling lives for sort of the Dunya ecosystem. I think that is, I'm very mindful of that. You know, the sort of the profitable side, I think is needed because we need to scale, and we need to run a company, and we need to ensure that we're paying, you know, the people that work for us. But at the end of the day, you know, the value in the product is that we're able to support all of these, you know, whether it's smallholder farmers, whether it's community organizations or whatnot, to be able to grow food and to, for themselves to be able to profit from that.
What's an insecurity of yours?
An insecurity of mine, fear of failing, also a fear of success.
I see.
I feel, I know that's a bit of an oxymoron. You know, I think like a lot of Tamils, you know, you grow up with needing to get 100%, and coming home with 98% is not ideal. So, you know, always afraid of failing, is kind of constantly in the back of my mind, I think, which is why I strive to do so much, and but it can be detrimental to your health as well. And a part of me had a fear of success. I know that's kind of weird, but you know, as a woman, as a Tamil, you know, there was a fear that, you know, I know I could do a lot as a personally. I think that's because I'm an overachiever and I have a lot of confidence in myself. But you know, what would that mean for me in a community? You know, being a woman in politics or being a woman in tech. You know, growing up, I mean, I was lucky in that, like, you know, my family really supported me in what I ended up trying to do. But there were people around me. They're like, should you go to university? You know, you like, I'm sure a lot of Tamil girls heard, you're not going to get married because, you know, you might be far more educated than, you know, a fellow Tamil male, or that, you know, you're no longer going to be part of the community. You're going to be up and doing all of this, you know. I've been mindful that I've got to travel a lot and meet amazing people. And where does that put me in place with the rest of the community, or, you know, my fellow peers? And it's a very unfounded fear, but I think there was a little bit of me that, you know, certainly had that. And I've been kind of working through that.
Well, what do you like to do for fun outside of work?
What do I like to do for fun? I like spending time with my family when I can. I try to travel as much as I can. I travel more for work than for enjoyment, but you know, what I learned a few years back was to kind of tack a day or two on my business trips so I can enjoy the cities that I'm in. I try to read a lot, but be mindful, I haven't really had much time to really sit down and read much these days. And this is probably very geeky and nerdy, and I probably shouldn't say this, but I do like building businesses. I like building things
Nothing wrong with
and
that. Yeah.
and bringing ideas to fruition, right? So I guess that's why I do what I do.
I literally, like what you, I guess I didn't realize I did it, but like whenever I read something, I like research about that business, like the economics of it and like what I could do to, like I want to actually do it, but it's just kind of like what people do, like watch TV shows. Sometimes I'll literally just like I'll look up places or like interesting ideas and like just figure out if it's viable or not. So I completely
Mhm.
get it. In terms of, I guess, your legacy, how would you want your friends and family to, I guess, describe you?
Oh wow. My legacy. I want my friends and family to say that I've been there, and that I've helped build, you know, I've helped build relationships and connections, and you know, helped people. But I'm mindful that you know, building a business or sometimes takes me away from my family and friends. But at the end of the day, I think if anything that COVID has taught us is that to be present and to be with family and friends, because everything else we do, I mean, that's just the icing on the cake. But you know, that's kind of where those connections are the important ones.
Love it. And so we're going to kind of move into the, I guess, funner or more fun part of the discussion today, which is a fun game that I like to call Creator Confessions. It's meant to be a speed round, so I'm gonna, say a bunch of statements, and you're gonna just kind of say the first thing that kind of comes to mind. So you ready, Sumi?
Okay.
It'll be fun. Don't worry. Favorite Tamil food?
Favorite Tamil food. Dosa.
Something that scares you?
Something that scares me. Not being relevant.
Mm. Favorite show you're watching?
Right now, it's Lucifer. I'm hooked on
I
it.
watched the first season. I got to get back to that. A place you're itching to travel to after this pandemic is over?
To Sri Lanka to see my father.
A fellow Tamil creator that you want to give a shout out to?
I would like to say Jay Vijayan. He's a mentor and somebody that has been a great advisor, and the work that he's doing is amazing at TechYoung.
For those of you who don't know, he used to be the CTO at Tesla.
Yes.
Favorite childhood memory?
Favorite childhood memory. The first time my father took me to an amusement park.
Pet peeve?
Incompetence.
A person or celebrity that you look up to?
Michelle Obama.
If you knew that you were going to die tomorrow, a regret that you would have?
Not spending more time with my family.
Age you want to retire, and I'll preface this by saying, when I think retire, it's like ownership of time. So do what you want when you want.
In that case, I'd like to retire by I'm 50.
Okay. A celebrity whose life you want to experience for one day?
That's a hard one. I can't even think of a celebrity right now.
I'm very curious to see if you're going to say what like 10 other people have said.
Oh,
I'll tell you the answer after you tell me your answer.
honestly, I'm throwing a blank.
Well, the answer that people like, it's crazy. His marketing is like amazing. Elon Musk. Like I think 10 people have
Oh,
said that. Yeah.
you know what? I used to think that, but the last couple of
Yeah.
years, he's just not my guy anymore.
That's okay. You don't have to have an answer. And the last question, or I guess the last thing is a PSA that you want to leave our audience with. So maybe there's some advice you want to give to like creators out there, or just general advice, or something that you want to get off your chest.
I would say for creators out there, be tenacious, be persistent. If believe in what you're doing, and if you believe in that, keep going.
Love it. To the succinct and to the point. So thank you, Sumi, for kind of jumping on the podcast. I think that was great. Your story is super fascinating. I think myself personally, and I'm sure, I think the audience will probably like listen to this, will be keeping track of kind of your progress. And as you and the rest of the team kind of launch, officially, I mean, I look forward to it. So thank you again for jumping on. And, if people want to get connected with you, maybe they're a potential investor, maybe someone that's just excited about your project and they're doing something similar, what's the best way for them to get connected to you?
Yeah, so they can reach out to us at info@dunyahabitats.com. Our website is www.dunyahabitats.com.
Awesome. So thank you again for jumping on. For those of you listening, appreciate it as always, and look forward to the next episode.
Great. Thank you very much, Era.